Thank you for choosing our channel. If you enjoy gripping stories of love, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now let's dive into today's tale. It started like any ordinary day in Robert's life. He was a man of routines, work, family, and occasional soccer games with his buddies. The world outside had its chaos, but his life had a predictable rhythm. At least, that's what he believed until an unexpected phone call shattered the fragile peace of his world. "Hello, is this Robert?" The voice on the other end was warm but unfamiliar. "Yes, who's calling?" he asked, slightly irritated by the disruption to his evening. "This is Emma from college," the voice said. Emma. The name sent a wave of nostalgia through Robert, though it was tinged with an unease he couldn't quite place. Emma was a chapter of his life he'd closed years ago, or so he thought. Memories of long conversations, shared dreams, and the night she disappeared from his life without explanation came flooding back. "What's this about?" Robert asked cautiously. I needed to talk." "It's important," Emma said, her tone laced with urgency. After a moment of hesitation, Robert agreed to meet her the following day. The past was calling, and he couldn't ignore it. The next morning, Robert arrived at the small cafe Emma had suggested. As he sat at a corner table, he noticed her walk in. Time had left its mark on her, but the spark in her eyes was unmistakable. "Robert," she said, smiling hesitantly as she sat down. "Emma." "It's been a long time," Robert replied, his voice a mix of curiosity and caution. "I owe you an explanation," Emma began, her hands nervously twisting the napkin in front of her. What followed was a story of regrets and missed opportunities. Emma admitted she'd left all those years ago because of fears and insecurities she couldn't face. But the real shock came when she revealed why she'd reached out now. "I've been in contact with Rachel," she said, naming Robert's wife. Robert froze. Rachel, his wife of 10 years, had never mentioned Emma. The air grew thick with tension as Emma explained how their paths had crossed. "She didn't know who I was at first. But when she found out, she confided in me," Emma said hesitantly. "Confided about what?" Robert demanded, his voice low but sharp. Emma looked him in the eye, her expression serious. "About things she's kept from you. Things I think you deserve to know." Robert's world, which had felt so secure just hours ago, began to tilt. What secrets was Rachel keeping? And why had Emma, of all people, become the bearer of this news? The meeting ended with more questions than answers. As Robert drove home, his mind raced. He didn't know what to believe or what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. The past had returned, and it demanded his attention. Robert couldn't shake the unease from his meeting with Emma. By the time he reached home, he was consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts. Rachel greeted him at the door with her usual warm smile, but for the first time, he wondered how much of that warmth was real. "Long day?" Rachel asked, placing a cup of tea in his hands. "Yeah. Ran into an old friend today," Robert replied, watching her face closely for any reaction. "Anyone I know?" she asked, her expression unreadable. "Emma," Robert said bluntly. Rachel's hand froze mid-motion, and for a brief second, something flickered across her face. Surprise? Guilt? Robert couldn't tell. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. "That's unexpected. What did she want?" Robert wanted to press her to demand answers, but he decided to play it cool. "Just catching up, I guess." Rachel nodded, her eyes avoiding his. Robert's heart sank. Something was definitely off. Over the next few days, Robert couldn't shake the feeling that his marriage wasn't as solid as he'd believed. He began to notice little things. A late-night phone call Rachel brushed off as work, a guarded look when he walked into a room, and a strange hesitancy in her demeanor. Determined to get to the bottom of things, Robert reached out to Emma again. They met at the same cafe, and this time Emma was more direct. "Robert, I didn't come back to stir up trouble," she began. "But Rachel and we've talked a lot, and she's confided things I think you need to hear." "Like what?" Robert demanded, his patience wearing thin. Emma hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. She told me she's been feeling distant from you. That there are things in your marriage she's struggled with but hasn't told you about. Robert clenched his fists under the table. Why would she tell you this? You're a stranger to her. Emma looked at him with a mix of sympathy and determination. Because sometimes it's easier to open up to someone who isn't part of your everyday life. But there's more, Robert. She's been seeing someone else. The words hit him like a freight train. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin as he processed Emma's revelation. Are you sure? Robert whispered, his voice trembling. Emma nodded solemnly. I wouldn't have told you if I wasn't. Robert left the cafe in a daze. When he got home, Rachel was waiting for him, her face a picture of concern. Are you okay? She asked, reaching out to touch his arm. He pulled away. We need to talk. Rachel's expression shifted instantly, her composure cracking. What's this about? And whoever it is you've been seeing behind my back, Robert said, his voice cold and steady. Rachel's face went pale, and for the first time, Robert saw fear in her eyes. The truth was about to come out, but how much of it was he ready to hear? The room was thick with tension as Robert and Rachel stood facing each other. For a moment, neither spoke, the silence between them almost deafening. You're accusing me of something awful, Rachel said finally, her voice trembling. I'm not accusing you of anything, Robert replied, his tone icy. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. Are you seeing someone else? Rachel hesitated, her hands fidgeting nervously. I can't believe you're listening to Emma of all people. She's trying to ruin us. Robert took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. Rachel, this isn't about Emma. This is about us. About the late-night calls, the distance, the lies. Just tell me the truth. Rachel looked away, her defenses crumbling. Fine, she said, barely above a whisper. There was someone. But it wasn't serious. Robert felt as though the ground had been ripped out from beneath him. Wasn't serious, he repeated, his voice rising. Do you have any idea what this does to me? To us? It's over, Rachel said quickly, her eyes pleading. I ended it months ago. I realized how much I love you, how much I don't want to lose what we have. Robert let out a bitter laugh. You love me, but you couldn't come to me when things got hard. Instead, you turned to someone else. I was lonely, Robert, Rachel shot back, tears streaming down her face. You've been so focused on work, on everything but us. I felt invisible. Her words stung, but they didn't justify what she had done. And your solution was to betray me, he asked, his voice breaking. Rachel sobbed openly now. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I swear it's over. Please, can we try to move past this? Robert shook his head, overwhelmed by a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, heartbreak. I don't know if I can. For the first time in their marriage, Rachel seemed to grasp the depth of the damage she had caused. She reached out, but Robert stepped back, creating a physical barrier that mirrored the emotional chasm between them. I need time, he said finally, his voice low but firm. Time to think about what I want, about whether I can ever trust you again. Rachel nodded, her face pale and tear-streaked. Take all the time you need. Just, please don't give up on us. As Robert left the house to clear his head, he couldn't shake the weight of Rachel's betrayal. He thought of Emma's warning, of the secrets Rachel had kept from him, and of the fragile state of their marriage. Could he forgive her? Or was this the beginning of the end? Robert spent the next few days in a haze of confusion and doubt. He had moved into the guest room, needing space to think. Rachel, on the other hand, was doing everything she could to repair the broken pieces of their marriage. She left notes for him, cooked his favorite meals, and avoided confrontation, but her efforts felt hollow against the weight of her betrayal. Emma's warning kept replaying in Robert's mind. She had hinted at more than Rachel had confessed. Was there still something Rachel was hiding? Driven by suspicion, Robert decided to dig deeper. One evening, when Rachel was out running errands, Robert found himself sitting at her desk. Her phone and laptop were there. His conscience battled with his curiosity. "This isn't me," he whispered to himself. But the unanswered questions were too much to bear. He opened her laptop, and his heart sank when he saw the email account she had forgotten to log out of. Most of the messages were mundane. Work emails, subscription updates, but one thread caught his eye. It was from someone named Jay. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" Robert hesitated before clicking, feeling both ashamed and justified. The email thread confirmed his worst fears. The messages weren't explicit, but they were undeniably intimate. Rachel had written to Jay about her doubts, frustrations, and loneliness. What hurt the most was how she had spoken about him, about their marriage, about his supposed neglect. In the most recent email, dated just 2 days before her confession, Jay had written, "Rachel, I respect your decision to end things, but I can't stop thinking about you. I hope we can still be friends." Robert slammed the laptop shut, his hands trembling. The pain of betrayal cut deeper with every revelation. Rachel hadn't been completely honest. There was still a lingering connection between her and this man. When Rachel returned home, she found Robert waiting for her in the living room. The tension in the air was palpable. "Where were you?" Robert asked, his voice calm but his eyes piercing. "Grocery shopping," Rachel said, holding up the bag in her hand. "Why? Do you know someone named Jay?" Rachel froze, her expression betraying her guilt. "Robert, I can explain." "I don't want explanations, Rachel. I want the truth," he interrupted, standing to face her. Tears filled her eyes as she set the grocery bag down. "Yes, I know Jay. He was someone I turned to when I felt lost. But it's over, Robert. I swear." "Then why is he still emailing you?" Rachel's face crumpled. "He reached out to me. I haven't responded. I promise." The pain in her voice was real, but Robert didn't know if he could believe her anymore. He felt like he was standing in quicksand, unsure of what was real and what was a lie. "I need more than promises, Rachel. I need actions," he said. "If you're serious about fixing this, you'll cut all ties with him. No more emails, no more messages, nothing." Rachel nodded, her tears falling freely. "I'll do whatever it takes, Robert. I'll block him right now." She pulled out her phone, showing him as she blocked Jay's number and email. But Robert couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The days that followed were tense and fragile. Rachel's efforts to mend their relationship were sincere, but Robert couldn't ignore the growing distance between them. Trust had been shattered, and rebuilding it seemed like an impossible task. Robert also found himself growing closer to Emma. Her concern for him was genuine, and her words of encouragement were a balm to his wounded spirit. But her presence also brought a new layer of complexity to the situation. As the cracks in their marriage widened, Robert began to question whether their relationship was worth saving, or if letting go was the only path to healing. The days felt longer as Robert navigated the murky waters of forgiveness and uncertainty. Rachel's efforts to rebuild their marriage were persistent but strained. She followed through on her promise to cut all ties with Jay, even letting Robert go through her phone and emails daily. But no amount of transparency could erase the doubt that lingered in Robert's heart. Rachel knew she couldn't undo her mistakes but hoped that her consistency would be enough to win back Robert's trust. She signed them up for marriage counseling, hoping a third party could help them bridge the growing divide. Their first session was tense. "I don't even know who I'm married to anymore," Robert admitted to the therapist. "I feel like I'm living with a stranger." Rachel's voice broke as she responded. "I made a terrible mistake, but I'm still the same person, Robert. I love you and I want us to work." The therapist encouraged them to open up about their fears and feelings, creating a space for vulnerability. For the first time in weeks, Robert saw a glimmer of hope. But it was fleeting, like a candle struggling to stay lit in a storm. Outside the counseling sessions, life carried on with its usual demands. Robert tried to focus on work, but his mind often wandered back to Rachel and the mess their marriage had become. He found solace in his conversations with Emma, though he kept their interactions strictly platonic. She became a sounding board for his frustrations, offering advice that was both practical and empathetic. One evening, Emma asked a question that lingered in Robert's mind long after their conversation ended. "Do you think you can ever truly forgive her?" she asked gently. Robert had no answer. Forgiveness seemed like a mountain he wasn't sure he could climb. Meanwhile, Rachel was grappling with her own internal struggles. She felt the weight of her choices every day and couldn't escape the guilt that consumed her. She missed the days when their marriage was full of laughter and love, and she vowed to do whatever it took to bring that back. One night, as Robert sat in the living room reading, Rachel approached him with a stack of letters. "I wrote these for you," she said, her voice trembling. Robert looked up, his expression skeptical but curious. "They're letters about how I've felt over the years. My regrets, my love for you, my hopes for us. I want you to know everything," she explained. Robert hesitated before taking the letters. "I'll read them," he said simply. That night, he stayed up late reading Rachel's heartfelt words. Each letter was a window into her soul, revealing her struggles with loneliness, her feelings of inadequacy, and her deep regret for the choices she had made. For the first time, Robert began to see the depth of her pain, and her love for him. But forgiveness wasn't a switch he could flip. It was a process, one that required time and effort. The next morning, Robert found Rachel in the kitchen, making coffee. "I read the letters," he said, his voice soft. Rachel turned to face him, her eyes full of hope and fear. "And they helped me understand where you were coming from," he admitted. "But understanding isn't the same as forgiving." Rachel nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. "No. I'll wait as long as it takes." Robert appreciated her patience, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was still missing. He needed clarity, closure, and a sense of purpose. That evening he reached out to Emma. "I need your advice," he said. Emma listened as Robert poured out his thoughts. Her response was both unexpected and profound. "Maybe you need to stop trying to fix things and start focusing on what makes you happy," she suggested. Her words struck a chord with Robert. For too long, he had been consumed by the past and the pain it brought. It was time to focus on the future, whether that included Rachel or not. Robert stood at a crossroads, both figuratively and literally. The weight of the past weeks pressed down on him as he sat alone in his car one quiet evening. He had parked by a hill overlooking the city, a place he often went when he needed clarity. Rachel's letters, their counseling sessions, and Emma's advice had all swirled in his mind like a storm. Each moment seemed to pull him in a different direction. His love for Rachel hadn't disappeared, but neither had the pain. Could he rebuild their marriage, or was it time to let go? The next morning, Rachel found Robert in the kitchen, sipping coffee. His expression was calm but resolute. "We need to talk," he said, gesturing for her to sit. Rachel's heart pounded as she took a seat across from him. She could tell by his tone that this was it, the moment that would define their future. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Robert began. "About us, about everything that's happened. And I've realized that no matter how much we love each other, trust is the foundation of any relationship. Right now, that foundation is broken." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild it," she said earnestly. "I believe you," Robert said, surprising her. "But rebuilding trust isn't just about one person's effort. It's about both of us. And honestly, I'm not sure I have the strength to do that anymore." Rachel's face fell, but she nodded. "I understand," she whispered. "I think it's best for both of us to let go," Robert continued. "Not because I don't care about you, but because I care enough to want both of us to find peace." They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of his words sinking in. Finally, Rachel reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for being honest," she said. "I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to keep you in a place where you can't heal." Over the next few weeks, Robert and Rachel worked on separating their lives with dignity and respect. They divided their belongings, settled financial matters, and agreed to remain civil for the sake of their shared memories. For Robert, the process was bittersweet. He felt a sense of loss but also a newfound sense of freedom. He reached out to Emma to thank her for her guidance and decided to focus on himself for the first time in years. As for Rachel, she began her own journey of healing. She enrolled in therapy, reconnected with old friends, and started volunteering at a local charity. Months later, Robert stood on the same hill overlooking the city. This time he felt a sense of closure. He had faced the pain, made the hard choices, and come out stronger on the other side. Looking back, he realized that letting go wasn't about giving up. It was about making room for new beginnings. Thank you for being part of Past Came Calling, a story of heartbreak and hope. If you've enjoyed this journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps keep these stories alive and reaching new audiences. See you next time.